Hi, everybody, and welcome to another fancy fun episode of Back to Basics. I continue, despite my best efforts, to be Pastor Don, and I am joined by the inimitable Courtney Fraley. Say hi, Courtney.
Hello.
Set you up with the dad joke. You didn't take it. I'm so sad for that. All right, so.
Maybe I missed it because what did you say?
I said, say hi, Courtney. That was your opportunity to say hi, Courtney. Come on. Old school dad jokes. You gotta love it. All right, fine. Today we're looking at Genesis chapter 14, part 2. Abraham blessed by Melchizedek. That's 14, that's the chapter, verses 17 through 24. Fair warning to everybody listening and or recording this podcast. There's not a whole heck of a lot in this one. So it's going to be probably a fairly short discussion here. There is one or two little pieces that might throw us a couple of speed bumps, but on the whole, there's not like a whole lot happening here.
I feel like we're allowed to go short once in a while with how often I'm sure we've gone long.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Totally fair. Also, my poor bedraggled computer will probably thank me for giving an episode that's a little more reasonable in length, because it's not having fun trying to burn these things. So let's look at 14, starting from verse 17. We're still dealing with a lot of fun and funky verbiage here, so I'll be happy to take it for you so we don't have to worry about it. Let's see. All right, here we go. Genesis chapter 14, verse 17. After his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. And King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. He blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I have sworn to God Most High, maker of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, so that you might not say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten and the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their share." That's it. Now, this is, of course, following up from where we were last week, where Abram went Liam Neeson in Taken on the armies of these various plains kings who happened to pick up a little lot on their way to the fields of war. Got his brother or his nephew back, and a bunch of other crap, and kind of routed. Let's see, up near Dan, he routed all of those who kind of taken everything from Sodom, Gomorrah, and also Lot. So as we get here today, the king of Sodom is pretty darn pleased with the fact that Abram, post the defeat of Sodom and Gomorrah, said, "You know what, screw these guys," and went and kicked their butts for him. So he's pretty happy about that. Wants to kind of make a made man out of Abram, and Abram says, "You know what? No, I don't want you to ever have claim over me in that way." And that's the general arc of the passage. I will throw out here, before I open it up to you for questions, that we do get an interesting moment here with Melchizedek of Salem. Now, Salem at this point, very, very ancient city. Start giving you an idea of how ancient it is. One of the most ancient cities worshiping God Most High. Eventually, much farther down the road, after the 12 tribes move in and things like that, Salem becomes Jerusalem. So Salem is actually the formative part of Jerusalem. So this goes back a ways here. So Melchizedek is one of the local kings. He's ruling over Salem, which is eventually where Jerusalem will be. So again, and this returns to a theme we've been seeing a lot in the text here, that these places we come to know aren't like sprung out of nothingness. Like Jerusalem didn't just suddenly be a thing because the children of Israel happened to pop into town and build it. Like, sure, they added to it, they built it into the way we understand it. It became the capital of the United Kingdom under David. It became a huge piece of Jerusalem going forward, but it still existed as a settlement long before the Israelite tribes moved in. So this, like a lot of ancient settlements, it's settlement on top of settlement on top of settlement. It's turtles all the way down, so to speak. So that is, there's nothing really to learn from that other than like kind of the historicity of it, but it is kind of a cool little piece of like, oh, hey, Jerusalem's still kind of poking its head into the story, even though it doesn't technically exist yet.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I never would have known that. It's good to learn those little tidbits. The basically what I took away from this is be careful who you accept favors from.
Yeah. And that is, to be honest, that is the general arc of this chunk of the chapter. Now, at this point, it's worth noting that this interaction between Abram and God, where Abram swears to God that, I will not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything from the king of Sodom here, so that he will never say that he made me who I am or anything like that. In those times, I mean, as we've seen with Abram and selling his wife into sexual slavery in Egypt, not going to let that one go. As we see in that, it's not uncommon for an exchange of good deeds or bad for this kind of exchange of goods to happen. And Abram unquestionably did a good deal for the king of Sodom here. So within the, I'm not going to say economics, but within the social dynamics of the time, the king of Sodom saying, yeah, I'm going to give you lots of stuff here. You get a good chunk of this, like you did the work here.
So that's like pretty normal.
It is actually very normal. So Abram saying, not taking the thing, I don't want you to ever have claimed that you made me, has a certain moral resonance to it, which is great. But there's also the question of why this guy? Because Abram's done this before. Like, it's not, I mean, the king of Egypt could step in and say, yeah, look, I gave that guy a whole bunch of crap. Like, I made him. Screw you, Sodom.
Yeah.
So it's
so why is he suddenly concerned with King?
Yeah, the king of Sodom here, Kedorlaomer.
Yeah.
No, it was not Kedorlaomer, it's somebody else. But it is worth knowing that this is the king with whom Abram is drawing his line. And it's not clear that Abram knows why he's drawing the line here. And I think that's important. So we don't know why Abram is not taking anything from the king of Sodom here. And it's not clear that Abram knows why. Abram's doing this because he's had his interaction with God, but it's not clear that he knows why. It's not clear to the reader why this is happening. But a couple chapters down the line, we start to find out exactly why this is. God is being careful in advance about who Abram is known to associate with. Now, it's interesting that God doesn't really care if Abram associates with Egypt, because at this point in the story, Egypt isn't really all that bad, relative to the rest of the region. Like, Egypt hasn't been enslaving the Jews yet, because the Jews aren't really a thing yet. Egypt is just Egypt, it's, cats and funny hats and people with long beards. Hey, good for them. And lots of food, lots and lots of food, Nile Valley and all that. So like, gross
oversimplifications for the win.
Yeah, I'm not a student of Egyptian history. I don't know which era we're talking.
Didn't you have an Egypt phase like every other kid?
I think every kid had an Egyptology phase the minute they saw Brendan Fraser running around with guns, but that's beside the point. At this point, like, there's not enough with all of these other countries for God to be like, yeah, not these guys. But all of a sudden here, God's being like, yeah, no, you don't want nothing to do with these guys. This is a sort of narrative epic foreshadowing because of what's coming next. No, Sodom and these kings here on the plain, dude, you don't want anything to do with them. And so this is kind of, to me, this is kind of really cool, because we're getting this with, we talked about this last week, with Lot continues to try to settle into Sodom, and bad shit keeps happening to him. And Abram, on the other hand, is very clearly keeping his distance from Sodom, from Gomorrah, from Elam, from anybody here in the plains. He's like, no, I don't want nothing to do with all of them. And that is Again, not clear why Abram's doing it, but it seems that God's telling him to do it. And we find out it's because, well, to put this in some fairly complicated theological terms here, they're assholes. Like we get in the book of Micah later on, in case anyone has a question, this is the sin of your sister Sodom. She had prosperous ease and overflow of bread, and she didn't help the poor and needy among them. These are guys who are all about that capitalism, that greed, that self-growth at the expense of the weak. And they're about to get nuked for it. So yeah, this is kind of God looking out for Abram and Co. here, saying, don't get into it with these people. Just don't.
No, okay, I might have something to talk about with this then. Hang on, let me take a quick little. And King Melchizedek of Salem, so that's the King of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. So the King of Salem is a priest of the Most High. And he doesn't see, and he's not doing anything here that's not socially standard, and there's nothing inherently morally wrong about giving someone, gifts as a thank you for something they've done for you.
Right.
Is this like a predestination sort of a thing? Like, oh, well, they're gonna be assholes later on.
This is, I would use a literary term, foreshadowing, rather than a predestination thing. But again, Salem is not one of the cities of the plain here. Melchizedek comes.
I keep thinking of all of this in like straight history, like modern straight history terms,
right.
where I'm like calling into question people's motives and stuff like that, instead of thinking about, okay, what makes a functional story.
Yeah,
it's
also interesting too. Like, you get Melchizedek of Salem, and Salem is not one of the cities of the plains. They don't get wiped out. They continue to grow and evolve, and as I mentioned, they've become Jerusalem. But what's interesting to me about this here is that we talked a couple episodes about Abram being really one of the first monotheists in this era of human history. But now we have him stumbling across King Melchizedek of Salem, who is not just apparently a monotheist, but is also a priest of Abram's God. So this is kind of like a where did Cain and Abel get their wives from, or Cain and Seth get their wives from sort of question here. Like,
well, that one to me makes sense, because monotheism is a fairly straightforward concept. There's one God, creator of everything. It makes sense that people could come to that conclusion with different backgrounds.
Right. But
to me, anyway.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you here. It seems logical now. But in the time where polytheism was the primary belief system for just about everybody in the region, Abram's development into a monotheistic practice is kind of new. But then for him, a few years later, to stumble down the line to find a society of people who are not just monotheists, but are monotheists after the same God, it seems. Like, I mean, Melchizedek is a priest of God Most High, the Creator. Now, this is going to travel into the land of supposition a little bit. And I wonder if there isn't some sort of interplay between Abram and Melchizedek, the people of Salem, and other monotheists in the region. Because I suspect that Melchizedek follows the same God via probably a very different path than Abram does. I imagine that much like Jews and Christians, Jews and Muslims, Muslims and Christians, same God, different practice would be my guess here. And that they're now going to feed off each other and develop together in an interesting sort of way. That would be my supposition here. Again, not supported by the text, but if we're to assume historicity in what we've seen, that would be my logical conclusion. Now that said, I do want to throw one last thing here that I'm surprised you haven't called me out on, because this is one that...
I can't miss a call out.
Because this is one that harkens back to...
We just take people.
Yeah.
Is that where we're headed?
No, actually, this is one that harkens back to things I was taught in church when I was a kid. Good old school Protestant beliefs and practices. And that comes in the back half of verse 20. So Abram gets blessed by Melchizedek, the servant of the God Most High, and Abram's immediate reaction is to do what?
Tithe.
Not just tithe, not just tithe. Because you say tithe because we have a preset meaning as American Protestants of what
1/10 of everything.
Specifically 1/10 of everything. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up in the Protestant church, I was given lectures about how when you tithe in the Christian church, we don't give everything. We give 1/10 of everything because that is the biblically prescribed number of what is appropriate to tithe in church. This is where that comes from. Now, I love to throw this one out here because do you know what this definitely isn't?
A prescription for what everyone needs to do all the time?
Exactly.
Is it seriously all it's based on?
For the most part, like this is where the practice originates. It comes back again and again a couple different times where people do this because
that helps. I'm like,
but like it's not really given as a prescription. And when you think about it, that makes sense because like a 1/10 tithe makes sense when you're living as an independent agent in a capitalist society attempting to power a social institution of a church to do its thing. And everybody tithes 10% that allows the organization to continue. It's structurally quite sound for churches laboring under a capitalistic system. But it doesn't make sense for the kind of familial communes that as a regular practice that families and tribes were in these days. It doesn't make sense for the kind of actual communist societies that early churches were in the time after Jesus, in which, again, I really highly suggest that people read the books of Acts and Romans, where they just gave everything to the community and then it was evenly distributed, because redistribution of the wealth is a Christian practice. Ding! And now that all the right-wingers have left the channel. But yeah, so that's one that I immediately call into question because it works super well for churches that are very specific capitalist, uneven, unequal, kind of uneasy pairing. But it doesn't make sense in any other context that the church is functioned in. And even here, Abraham is giving 1/10 of everything as a response to the blessing of God conveyed to him by Melchizedek. It's not a regular exchange. It's a generosity response based on his reception of a blessing here. So like the interpretations we've piled up on it over the centuries make no sense with respect to the original context. This is almost...
Well, and personally, it's been a rare day, if ever, that I've lived under circumstances where giving 1/10, like pre-tax especially, of it, which is what I was taught you're supposed to do, of everything you make, just monetarily, not even considering other bounty in your life, giving 1/10 of income was a plausible thing to be doing. I'm probably doing the best I've ever been doing, and is still like, no, that's not really.
I got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid because I flat out challenged the pastor to his face. I said, what about the people who wouldn't be able to eat if they give up 1/10 of their income? Like, how is God okay with that? And the answer I got was something God will provide. And I'm like, no, God doesn't seem the type to me to construct artificial barriers to people and then like magnanimously grant largesse in order to get them over the barriers that he already provided when he could have just not had that.
Oh, dude, what are you talking about? The churches we were raised in is entirely based on the concept of providing artificial barriers that he then magnanimously grants us the ability to get over, but only if we do things the way he says. It's the entire basis of like the American Christian church as I was raised in it.
You're not wrong. And
the whole concept of the crucifixion, like, it's like, okay, well, you can't get here unless we do this, so we're going to do this, and now you can get here. Again, barrier, provision to get over the barrier that I put there.
Without getting into the horrendousness that is penal substitutionary atonement theology, which is just,
that's a mouthful. You want to spit that out so people can hit Google?
Penal substitutionary atonement theology. Don't bother Google, just join the Discord server. We've already
join the
Discord.
We actually had a pretty good conversation about this recently. It's
yeah,
all new to me.
It's a mess. It's foundational to the American church, and everywhere throughout the rest of the world, Christians are looking at it going, what is wrong with you people?
Really? So everywhere else that's like looked at as like,
everywhere else that hasn't been poisoned by parasitic American Christianity over the last 100 years, I should clarify. So it's never as gray or black and white as I like to make it out. But yeah, no, penal substitutionary atonement theory as a core belief is a weird one. But it's not what we're talking about in Genesis today. But
yeah,
that sort of
getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but still important stuff.
That sort of artificial barrier creating like methodology evolves from some of the most innocuous stuff in the world. I remember, and I'm going to paraphrase it badly, but I remember hearing about a missionary to somewhere in Africa who had had a conversation with an unreached tribe of folks out there. I know the colonialism's strong with this one, but bear with me. And he came there full-hearted trying to preach the gospel and says, well, Jesus came so that you might be saved. And the tribesmen thereby were like, saved from what? Life's pretty good. Like what we all said, what you want to tell me that my life sucks so that your God can make it better, but my life's already just fine. In accepting your God, I would have to make my life worse in order for your God to make it better. It doesn't track. The logic.
You have to require me to hate my life.
Yeah, and I don't hate my life, and a lot of us don't. I mean, like I'll be honest. Aspects of my life I hate. Some of the people in it I'm not a huge fan of.
I mean, like a typical millennial, I've spent a great deal of my life hating my life, but not now. I'm actually doing all right now.
Yeah. And there is a difference too between the sort of self-hate that these things attempt to perpetuate and the millennial style of hating life. When a millennial says, I hate my life, they're saying, I hate the arbitrary bullcrap that's been enforced upon me as a member of this broken society. They're not saying I hate myself and the way I interact with the world because I'm a terrible garbage person most of the time.
A lot of that going around.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. So anyway, this is all in an extreme digression to say this is the origin of one of those artificial barriers where we take something that Abram did as a one-time decision and blow it up to be, we have to do this all the time in capitalism, which does not track. So anything else we want to peek at with this, pull at with this passage here, or do we want to call it for today?
I think we've wrung about as much content as we can out of.
As I said,
how many verses?
Here. Yeah, just a few, not quite 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, there isn't really a lot here. There are a few kind of ground laying pieces for what's going to come next. Next week, we are going to start to wade into the complexity of chapter 15. And I got to tell you, chapter 15 is a big one. Chapter 15 is the big covenant story. This is God's covenant with Abram. And this is, we get that famous verse, and he believed the Lord and the Lord reckoned it to him as righteousness, which is so often used as a cudgel for don't ask questions, just believe. That's not what it's about. So, there's going to be a lot. In fact, I'm honestly thinking that our episode on Genesis 15 might wind up being a two-parter just for length. Don't know yet, haven't recorded. We'll see when we get there. But so we got a lot.
When will you get in line and accept the establishment like a good Christian?
I have notes on that concept. So anyway, a lot to say about that. That's coming next week. But if you're wondering what you can do this week that may be helpful.
Oh yeah, like, share, and subscribe, and comment.
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, that really does help.
Follow us. Don't forget to ring that bell.
Yeah, all that stuff, but particularly the sharing thing. Like the more eyes we get this in front of, the more help we can be to folk. And our hope in doing this is to show people that, one, you can make jokes while reading the Bible. It's okay. You don't have to take it hyper seriously. Some of the stuff is a little bit ridiculous and fun to joke around about, but also that it's okay to try to understand this. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to pick at it. It's okay to look at the history, to study the language, and to
it's okay to not know.
Yeah, it's okay to not know. It's okay to not have answers to some of this stuff because it's thousands of years old and we're not going to have answers to this stuff. And also God's weird and trans-temporal and transcendental and omnipotent and omnipresent. If you think you can understand how God's working, then you don't know what God is and probably need to get back to basics, to plug the title of the series. Oh, full circle there.
Well, and if you're like me and you've been in the church like most of your life and have kind of drifted away due to gestures vaguely at everything, like it's really nice to be in a space where it is made abundantly clear that it's okay to question things, it's okay to rethink things, it's okay to kind of go back to square one and be like, all right, what is this whole religion about? I need to decide if this is my path.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of are open to a lot of people's truths, and you don't have to be exclusionary to be Christian.
Yeah, honestly, aren't supposed to be. So there's that.
Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of stuff going on in our community. Discord server is a thing. That's where most of our community stuff is happening because most of us are in different places around the globe. If you're just coming into this point of the video now, that's a weird choice, but like I'm the pastor and I'm in Japan. Courtney is in Michigan. We've got people in New Jersey. We've got people in Indiana. We've got people currently in Europe right now. I don't think he's back yet. So we got people moving around. We are not bound to a particular location, which means that this Discord server is actually our sanctuary, so to speak. It's where we fellowship. Yeah. It's where we talk about stuff. It's where we kind of have what would otherwise be Bible study classes, other than videos like this.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking for a church, but you're tired of the judgmental white folk down the corner with the big building that are doing things that are weird, come up on Discord. We'll take care of you there. Otherwise, have a good week. We'll see you for what I assume is going to be part one of a fairly comprehensive episode next week. Have a good week. Take care, y'all. Bye.
Bye.